Hello, I am TheWrap's executive editor, Adam Chitwood. I'm joined here today by, introduce yourself, sir.
Brian Lowry, media editor.
Welcome, welcome. We are here to chat all things Kimmel, ABC, Disney, the world of media, the current landscape we live in, as times are challenging. So, you know, we're gonna, have a chat about what happened, what's been going on, what we're hearing, the current reporting, and what happens next. Just to briefly recap, on Monday, Kimmel had a joke in his monologue, making a crack about the conservative reaction to Charlie Kirk's shooter. He characterized that shooter as MAGA. Obviously, that was incorrect. There was uproar online. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr came after and said, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Wednesday, Jimmy was writing a monologue where he planned to address the reaction to his comments and what he had said. From our sources and our reporting, Disney wasn't comfortable with what he was going to say, felt it was going to further inflame tensions, and decided to pull the plug. The show is now suspended indefinitely. It is not canceled, contrary to what a certain president has said. According to our reporting right now, Disney is very much trying to find a way to get Kimmel back on the air as soon as possible. They are in active discussions with Kimmel to do that, but they are trying to find from what we've been told, quote, meaningful way to address the situation. Again, in a way that doesn't inflame tensions. As of right now, as of this recording, Friday morning, Kimmel is not back on the air. There is no plan to put him back on the air in terms of a specific schedule. And we have had really intense reaction on both sides. There's been obviously cheering and Trump kind of taking a victory lap. Brendan Carr feeling emboldened, now saying he's going to go after the View. And comedians rallying around Kimmel. That includes people like Mark Maron and Patton Oswalt, but also Seth Meyers, Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, and Jon Stewart all addressed this issue on their Thursday night shows, stood firmly behind Kimmel, and threw their support behind him. This is where we stand right now. Brian, what's your assessment of the situation? How are you feeling about where we're at, and what are in your estimation, what are the chances of Kimmel coming back on the air?
Well, I think it's a mess. And I think, it's interesting because I think the affiliate groups, it's funny. I've been doing this for a long time and I covered affiliate issues going back, years and years and years. I mean, I remember when the ABC affiliates, when Bob Iger, who now runs Disney, was running ABC, balked at carrying NYPD Blue, and the show went on with more than 50 ABC affiliates not carrying it. And, basically the company at the time said, we stand behind the show. The show went on, it became a hit, and everybody got on board. That seems incredibly quaint now. I think the station groups are bigger, the station groups are emboldened. As we know in the case of Sinclair, they push their own political agenda. And it's hard for me to see a scenario. I see a scenario where Kimmel could come back. It's hard for me to see a scenario where he comes back at full strength, which is, I think, what Disney was trying to avoid. I think what got them into this mode where they sort of panicked and said, okay, let's pull him off the air, was that they realized he was going to go on down, 10, 15% in terms of national reach. And it was sort of like, well, how can we smooth that over before, that happens? How can we take care of that situation? But I think pulling him off was exactly the wrong move because it emboldened everyone who made it, who thought that they had buckled, kneeled, caved in, pick your favorite, word for capitulation here. And now I don't know how they get him back on. I really don't. I mean, I think best intentions would be to bring him back, but it becomes an issue of what do they have to do and how much is he willing to grovel for something that I think a lot of people agree was a pretty innocuous statement.
Yeah, I think I mean, I haven't mentioned yet, but Sinclair, one of the bigger broadcasting groups, has demanded that in order to put it back on their airwaves, they want an apology and they want him to donate to Turning Point USA, which is Charlie Kirk's company, and I believe to the Kirk family as well. Nexstar also pulling him off. They have not, I believe, they have not explicitly asked for or demanded an apology, but these affiliates are putting strings on his return, right? And
Right.
it, you know, from reading between the lines of our reporting and what we're hearing in terms of Disney and Kimmel's side trying to find a way back, it sounds to me, and I don't have any inside knowledge on this, that Disney is asking for an apology and Kimmel is saying he doesn't want to do that.
Yeah, if I were Kimmel, I mean, I could see addressing the situation in a way that said, basically, I'm sorry if what I said was taken out of context or inflated in a way that made it sound like I was being insensitive. So just to be 100% clear, I meant this regarding Charlie Kirk and his death. The problem with that is that that won't mollify the Trump people who have been very, very, very explicit about the fact that they really want to silence what they see as an overwhelming tide of negative jokes. There's no other way to put it. Negative jokes about them coming from the late night shows. And I
Right.
think, I don't know how you address that. I mean, it's funny because I mean, if you follow, social media, every 20 minutes, someone posts something trying to justify why the FCC did what it did, and then someone posts in response a clip of Trump saying they shouldn't be licensed, they shouldn't be allowed to say the things they say about me, which just reveals that it has nothing to do with regulatory concerns. It has to do with being thin-skinned.
Right. And the claim was insensitivity, that the joke was insensitive. And I think no surprise here, Jon Stewart really hit the nail on the head with his Thursday night segment. I assume you watched it.
I did.
It
Yeah.
was over 20 minutes of uh, Colbert Report-esque, uh, Trump approved satirical Jon Stewart, doing the Daily Show in a format that would please Trump. But in that segment, he threaded in a bunch of clips of conservatives and Trump saying the exact kind of insensitive things that Kimmel is now being accused of being pulled off the air for.
Right. Well, look, I mean, this has always been kind of a red herring. I mean, I think the whole free speech issue, the on the campaign, they talked about restoring free speech. They talked about, how the right had been silenced. This has always been about basically, we don't like what you're saying about us, and we want to level the playing field. And the problem is that there aren't that many you can there's so many Tony Hinchcliffes out there that Netflix can order specials from, these conservative comedians. But the late night comedy scene, and indeed comedy, tends to be liberal. And if you're going to have these kinds of voices, you're going to have to expect that some of them are going to lean to the left. um Presidents for decades have dealt with that reality on both sides of the political aisle, and we found a president who just doesn't like to be criticized. I mean, you can strip all the other stuff away, and this is really that Trump doesn't like to be criticized, doesn't really respect the First Amendment on the ground, in the way that most people think of it, and therefore is looking for ways to use the fact that he's in power to silence his critics. And you can dress it up any way you like, but that's what this really boils down to. And if you don't believe it, just listen to what he says.
Yeah. And gaming this out, I mean, uh, there's two stories on the wrap right now. I want to talk about both of them. But the first one is kind of our reporting on Inside What Happened. But myself and Lucas Manfredi, uh, Lucas talked to Brian Franz, who was a former ABC daytime executive, and he kind of gamed this out. And he said, even if you went to Sinclair and Nexstar and you said, we did everything you asked, like Jimmy apologized, he wrote a check, he made a donation, he did all these things. The next thing you're going to have is, okay, well, how are you going to muzzle him? How are you going to keep a leash on him? How's he going to be controlled? Is this going to happen again? The next time Jimmy says something that they're upset about, the uproar happens again. The exact same cycle happens over again. So uh, Brian Franz was kind of making the argument that like making an apology or kind of mollifying, kowtowing to exactly what these demands are, kind of gets you nowhere because it's the cycle's just going to happen again.
Right. And just to be I'm going to say something that I never thought I would say, just to be somewhat sympathetic to Sinclair and Nexstar in all of this, because it's hard to be, their regulatory interests in terms of relaxing the rules on TV stations probably have some merit, in the sense that TV is a declining business. Linear TV is going the way of the dodo bird. It's needs help. They think they can consolidate and improve their financial health. There's probably something to that. The problem is that as they get bigger, and what they want is the FCC to relax the rules so they can get enormously bigger, they're exercising control over programming. And, affiliates always had some say over what they wanted to put on in their local community, but they were not supposed to be a veto vote over what the network puts on. They're trying to operate as a veto.
Right, and I saw, just to like kind of underline, we've been here before. I saw a clip of George Carlin talking about the FCC and having an exact same, like a
Yeah.
very similar issue from decades ago. So this is a, for some people that may find this new, this is kind of a continuing issue, but the I would say aggressiveness with which Carr is wielding this under the direction of Trump is new, or at least feels new to me.
It is. And you can't overstate the fact that Trump is um someone very rooted in the 1980s in his worldview. He sees the major broadcasters as the biggest thing in media. They're not. He talks about being licensed, the networks being licensed. The networks don't carry the licenses, the individual stations do. He's remarkably, for a guy who, burnished his image on The Apprentice, who's been around media for all of these years, who was a personality and a celebrity long before he became a politician. His knowledge of the mechanics of how all of this works is actually pretty limited. And it basically just boils down, if you strip it to its core, to they're saying bad things about me. That shouldn't be fair. And then it falls to the people working for him, in this case, Brendan Carr, to find a reason, or really a pretense, to act upon that demand. And I think, um, there are some interesting tides going on. Trump's popularity has shrunk. He doesn't have quite the leverage he does, but he's still the president he had, but he's still the president of the United States. And as long as the people around him are willing to, seek to enact what he wants them to do, he has considerable clout that these companies recognize, not necessarily to derail their businesses, but just to make their lives more difficult. And I think for a lot of people, the most disturbing part of this is that it hasn't taken action always to make these media companies bow. It's just taken the threat of action. And I think that's why Disney is really going to come under some criticism for this, as they already have, and I expect it to continue until this is resolved. And as you say, I don't know that even when it's resolved, it will be resolved.
Right. Well, and you have a great piece on the wrap as well. Tell us a little bit about Bob Iger's history with standing up to affiliates and these kinds of things.
Yeah, so I'm old enough to remember when Bob Iger was installed as, the Bob Iger started his career at an ABC affiliate in Ithaca, New York, as a weatherman. He bounced around all over the network before he became the head of the network. At ABC Entertainment, he put on NYPD Blue, which was a huge fight with the affiliates, and the company behind him at the time, it was Capital Cities, which owned ABC, backed him, and the show went on, became a hit. A few years later, they had affiliate threats and one defection over Ellen coming out as gay on her sitcom. ABC just powered through that. So Iger knows this world. He's been around it, but it's a different world now. And he's in his 70s. He's stated that he's going to name a successor next year. So the Disney, Bake Off is in full swing to see who's going to replace him. And this is going to be inevitably part of his legacy, how he handles this. He's been an enormously influential CEO. He's made Disney massively bigger with the acquisitions he's made while he was at the studio. And in an odd sort of way, those acquisitions and the size of Disney have made Disney more vulnerable to this kind of pressure campaign.
Right. And I mean, the X factor in all of this is business, right? Disney wants to acquire Fubo. They're going to need approval from the DOJ because Fubo is another sports streamer. There are concerns that Disney will control too much sports. They have ESPN. Nexstar obviously has this big Tegna deal that they need to get approved and pushed through. So very similar to the Paramount Skydance deal of Skydance wanted to buy Paramount. They needed regulatory approval. Therefore, all of the settlements with the Trump administration over 60 Minutes and CBS, you're seeing a lot of these kind of decisions being made at these upper levels to push business interests through. And the trickle down effect on that is uh, uh, frankly, just the silencing of these folks and the kind of the kowtowing to Trump.
Right. I mean, the question becomes then what, in the case of Paramount, it was a good example because Skydance was buying Paramount. And you look at it and say, okay, what are they buying? What makes Paramount valuable? Um, One of the things, obviously it's Mission Impossible and Star Trek and those in the streaming service, and those are the things Skydance probably wanted the most. But also Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart and talent that people is drawn to. And in the same way, Disney, Disney is a massive company, but one of the things that Disney makes Disney valuable is having signature talent that produces content that people want to watch and pay for and stream, and willing to sit through ad pods for. And if you begin to squeeze out gradually those voices, um, you just inevitably are going to be stripping away some of the value of the asset. So it's really a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. I don't envy them the decision, but that doesn't mean they made the right one here.
Right. And the irony, I see an irony in all of this as well, which is, we've written and we've spoken ad nauseum about the death of late night. And, Trump has said late night's dead, the ratings are terrible. And yet you see in the wake of like Colbert's cancellation, Kimmel, there is this groundswell. I mean, I think it's really underlying the cultural importance that these hosts have. It's not about how many people tune in on Monday night. It's about what is the net effect on culture that Seth Meyers, Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, Jon Stewart, John Oliver have. And I would argue it's pretty significant, at least in America.
I agree. And I think it's another one of those things, which is, oftentimes you don't miss something until it's gone.
Yeah.
If you take something away from somebody, then it's like, well, wait a minute. It's sort of that old image of the father asleep on the couch, and someone walks through the room and turns off the TV, and he wakes up and says, "Hey, I was watching that."
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the way I think people feel about late night TV, is that they don't necessarily sit through the shows all the time, but they're glad it's there. It's something they associate, they know who those guys are. Once in a while, they may turn them on and catch a joke. They may see something in their social media feed and watch it. You feel like you have a relationship with them.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's what, that isn't easily forged. I mean, when they start talking about turning that on The View, I confess I'm not a huge fan, nor am I a regular viewer of The View. But there are people who have a real connection to The View. And if they start, saying, oh, we're going to take off The View, or The View's going to be under the microscope also, it's going to upset a lot of people.
Yeah. And just because so these companies make money off of late night on linear, right? But YouTube, Jon Stewart's monologue on that Daily Show is getting over 1 million views every week on YouTube. These companies aren't making enough money off of YouTube and social media to make it a viable product. But I think what I'm trying to say is like just because they can't make money off the linear doesn't mean people aren't watching. People are seeing and experiencing these late night hosts, just not in the way that's making the companies enough money to make them a viable product.
Right. Well, and the interesting part is, look, late night may have, I mean, based on everything that we've reported and everything we've seen, late night may have gradually faced a slow death for all the reasons that we're talking about. But what's happening is it absolutely appears like it's been hastened by the Trump administration putting its thumb on the scale, trying to silence people that Trump doesn't like. And that's the part of this which I think has set off alarm bells all over the place, for people who consider that these voices are significant. I mean, satirists and comedians, they're not news anchors, but what they say and the right to say it is every bit as important. And to a lot of people, it's the way they get their news. People who don't sit for a 30-minute nightly newscast anymore, but who might watch Colbert or Kimmel's monologue, you get news distilled through their filter. Now, you're getting it through their filter, but you are getting news.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we start to wrap up here, game this out. If Kimmel does not come back, what do you think happens next? Do you think Seth and Jimmy are gone next? Do you think late night goes away? Do you think Kimmel sets up shop at HBO?
I mean, I think Kimmel and Stewart, I mean, Kimmel and Colbert will both have, and Stewart, if it comes to that, they'll all have options. I mean, it's not like these guys are going to be hurting for places to work. Fallon may very well be the last one standing because he was already the most innocuous and least political host. And if the decks are cleared on some of these other shows, that may help him a little bit. Myers, I think, there were signs that show might not be super long for the world because of the economics before all of this, but obviously there would be some more pressure on him. And, realistically, I think that the NBC ought to stick with its late night things for a while, but they're a big company and they're vulnerable too. As if this pattern holds and these companies are going to show themselves to be willing to cave in, assuming the threat is right to their business, they all want to get bigger, make deals, and by the way, that could limit the number of options for these guys too, because you mentioned HBO. Well, if Paramount makes a bid for Warner Brothers Discovery, HBO is part of Warner Brothers Discovery. Is HBO going to be as hospitable to these voices? We don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Be curious to see how John Oliver responds to all of this.
Well, the one thing John Oliver will do is poke his corporate parent in the eye. That is his absolute favorite thing.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much, Brian. I guess we'll all stay tuned. And thanks for
Why
chatting
not?
with me.
Yeah.
Find out more about all of this on TheWrap.com. And thanks for watching.